everybody. Welcome back once again to Biblical Greek Made Easy. This is Class 3 of Module 1, and today we continue to learn the cases of the nouns in the Greek system. Again, every sentence we're going to translate in the New Testament is going to have these cases in there, and this is foundational to understand what's going on and to get that Greek system, get that knowledge down that's going to help you read and translate New Testament Greek. Let me encourage you with a scripture here as we get started. Paul writes in Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 and 24. He says, "Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward." You are serving the Lord Christ. I want you to remember that we're serving God in this process. We're serving the Lord Christ. And learning Greek, learning noun cases and all the different things that we're doing, these are discipleship moments. These are hard work in the process of learning how to read and translate God's word in its original language. And that's a worthwhile task. And so I want to encourage you to do it, to keep going, to put your all into this. And there's all sorts of enjoyment in there and on the other side as well. And so here's the tip of the day. The tip of the day is to keep climbing the Greek staircase. Keep climbing the Greek staircase. What do I mean by that? I'm going to tell you in just a second, but that's the tip of the day. Keep climbing the Greek staircase. Let me tell you what I mean. So you might think of a staircase looking a lot like this, okay? Not complex. There's stairs. They all go kind of up in the same direction, kind of up and to the right. That's the direction that we're talking about. But the Greek staircase looks a little bit different. The Greek staircase looks a little bit more like this. Like it was put together with, I don't know, like a carpenter who maybe didn't know what he was doing. He didn't have a measuring device and he just tried to eyeball it, and his glasses were broke and his eyesight was horrible or something like that, right? Here's what I mean by that. Some lessons are going to be harder than others. There's going to be more content in certain lessons, certain class periods, certain chapters that we do together. Some are going to seem easier and some are going to seem harder. But here's the thing. Those harder ones tend to be the really important ones. They tend to be the ones that bring the most payoff from a reading and translating Greek perspective. So we can't slack off on those. We can't bail when it gets hard. We have to keep pushing as hard as we can. And so even though our climb may look a bit different, it may look kind of crooked and weird and all that kind of stuff, we got to keep going. And I bring that up because today is one of those times. There's just a little bit more going on today that we have to learn, that we have to master. And I don't want you to get bogged down or overwhelmed or be tempted to quit. I want you to keep going. I want you to keep climbing that Greek staircase. So let's talk about why this matters and what we're going to learn. So we're going to keep talking about nouns. The building blocks of any language are nouns, and we have to get those down. We have to know how Greek does nouns in order to read and translate. We're going to learn the next two cases of nouns, giving us all four. And notice that I put an asterisk next to that. There is a fifth case that we'll learn later called the vocative case, but it's very small, it's very minor, it's not nearly as big as any of these four that we're talking about. Don't worry, don't be scared that there's like another shoe coming later that's going to drop or whatever. Essentially, these are the four cases. I just can't fully say that there's only four because there is that fifth one out there. I'm too honest. I have to tell you right up front. And then we're going to learn the definite article. The definite article is a little bit complex. It's certainly more complex in Greek than in English, but the definite article is your friend, and that's going to help you a ton once we start reading and translating sentences, okay? So let's talk a little bit about nouns. Let's review. So we've talked about how nouns can be subjects in a Greek sentence. That's the nominative case. And we've talked about how they can be direct objects. That's the accusative case. We're going to learn two more cases today, and these two are going to be the possessive case. If you're going to have a noun that possesses another noun, like Bill's pencil, we'll look at in a second. And then the indirect object, which is going to be the dative case. Possessive is going to be genitive. Indirect object is going to be dative. So let's get into this. I showed you this example before. It's a bit of a ridiculous example, where in English we would say the boy threw the ball. In Greek, we would modify those nouns to have certain endings on them, right? So the boy os threw the ball on. That's our nominative and our accusative. right? And we also said that Greek could also say the ballon through the boyos, and that doesn't mean that the ball through the boy like it would in English, but that function in the sentence comes from the case of the word, not the word order. Okay, so that's one of those things we're working hard to forget that our English brains have programmed us to think. That's one of those things we're trying to forget, that our English brains have programmed us to think, that we think word order is really important. And in English it is, but in Greek it's much, much less important. Instead, we want to look at the case, which is going to tell us the function. So that's our nominative and accusative. Let me show you kind of a ridiculous example here for the genitive and the dative. Okay, so if we have an English sentence like this, the boy threw Lily's ball to Declan. Okay, Lily would be very upset if I did this, or if a boy came up and threw her ball to Declan. She's very protective of her toys from her brother Declan. Those are my two dogs, by the way, Lily and Declan. But what case is the boy going to be in here? Right, it's going to be the nominative case because it's the subject of the sentence. Threw is our verb, and then Lily's ball is what comes next. Which of those is the direct object? Yes, it's ball. Ball is the thing being thrown, so that's our direct object, and that would be in the accusative. So that Lily's piece, that Lily's word, would be in the genitive, and then the to Declan is going to be the dative. So the genitive case shows possession. That's what I've suggested to you before. The genitive case shows possession. And the word in the genitive usually follows the word that it's modifying. Okay? And I'll show you some examples of that here in just a second. But usually the genitive is going to come second, and it's going to modify the word that's right before it. And the key word for translating genitives is the word of. Of. Okay? And let me show you some examples in English. So, Bill's pencil, that's a possessive, okay? The pencil is being modified by Bill. And so notice that in English we can say Bill's pencil, or we could say the pencil of Bill. Those ideas are essentially exactly the same. They're just in a little bit different form. Okay? The one on the right there, the pencil of Bill, that's going to be the one that's a bit more Greek. That's going to be kind of how Greek thinks of it, the pencil of Bill. So pencil would be in whatever case it needed to be for the sentence, but the Bill part would be genitive. The next one there, God's Son. This shows up a fair amount in the New Testament, as you would imagine. Or the Son of God. Same kind of idea. One's using an apostrophe S, one's using the word of and flipping them around. But Son of God would be huios to theou, Son of God. The theou would be the genitive of God there. And then men of integrity, okay? Where integrity is modifying men. Notice for this one in English, we wouldn't say integrity's men. I suppose we could say that if we wanted to personify integrity in some sort of a way. But that's a little bit stranger, right, in English? So that you see of shows up in each of those. That's going to be a key word in how we think about genitive here as we get started. Let me show you some Greek examples, okay? So here we go. He doxa anthropou. He doxa anthropou. He doxa is our noun, and it means glory. Now, can you tell me what the gender of doxa is? Good. If you memorize that with the vocabulary word, you know that that's a feminine noun, okay? Doesn't really matter for this sentence, but just something I want you to keep thinking about is that gender piece. And then anthropou comes from anthropos, which you may know, and that means of man. So this means the glory of man, or of humanity. Okay, and so anthropou is in the genitive, and we're using that of word. We could say man's glory here if we wanted to, but the glory of man, okay, as one sentence. The second one there, ta erga theou. Ta erga theou. Ta erga means the works. Yes, the works. And it's neuter. Okay, it's neuter plural. And notice that ta erga, this could be accusative plural, or it could be nominative plural, either one. But we have the theou there, the of God, so the works of God. Theou is genitive, and it's modifying works. Now notice, this isn't a complete sentence there, ta erga theou. It's just a part of a sentence. So since this could be either nominative or accusative, this could be the beginning of a sentence, like the works of God changed my life, or you could say, I love the works of God. It could fit either one of those places, because this could be nominative, the subject, or it could be accusative and be the direct object. Either of those are fine. So notice there's this possessive element there, and that word of is going to be key. I want you to think about that right now, that genitive and of are connected. Now let's talk about the dative. The dative case is the case for the indirect object. Okay, what's an indirect object? We'll talk about that here in just a second. But some key words that are going to go with dative are to, in, with, etc. Those are the words that we're going to use for dative. Genitive is real simple in that of is going to be the primary word connected with that. But dative can have a handful. To, in, with, even for sometimes. So we just want to be aware of that there's a couple words that go with dative. Now, let's do, once again, a little grade school English review. Now, here's our parts of a sentence again. We've seen this before. We've got the subject, which would be in the nominative. We've got our verb. And then we've got our direct object, which would be in the accusative, okay? Now, if we add an indirect object into this sentence, it's going to look like this. And the indirect object receives the benefit of the action of the verb. Now, that's a little bit confusing to just hear that like that. So let me give you an example. The boy threw the frisbee to Lily. Let's break this down. The boy is our subject, so that's going to be in the nominative. Threw is the verb. The frisbee, what case is the frisbee going to be in? Yes, it's going to be accusative because it's the direct object. It's receiving the action of the verb. It's the thing that's being thrown. Now, who's receiving the benefit of this? It's Lily, right? Because she gets to go chase the frisbee, or she gets to catch the frisbee. She's a really good frisbee catcher, by the way. The boy threw the frisbee to Lily. Notice that word to. It could be other verbs that we use. We might say, we could say at Lily, in Lily. That one doesn't make sense. But sometimes those words are going to flex based on what makes most sense in English. But Lily is receiving the benefit of the action of the verb. So remember, the dative case is the case of the indirect object, and to, with, in, those are key words that are going to go with this. Let's look at a Greek sentence. Angelos kuriou ephane auto. Now, angelos we've seen before. That's going to mean angel, and that's in the nominative case. So that's going to be our subject, exactly. Now, ephane, you don't know this, but that's our verb, okay? And that's going to mean appeared. So we have an angel appeared. Now, what are we going to do with that kuriou there? Okay, kuriou. It's genitive, and in this case, word order is going to matter a little bit because it's going to be modifying the word that's right in front of it. In this case, angel. So kuriou, kurios is the lexical form. It means Lord. So angelos kuriou means an angel of the Lord. And then ephane, appeared, auto, to him. That's our indirect object, okay? So in this sentence, we have a genitive and an indirect object to go along with our subject, okay? Notice we don't have a direct object in this one. Appeared does not take a direct object. We call that an intransitive verb. You don't need to know that. I know this is Biblical Greek made easy. This is just for the small percentage of you that may be interested in that. A verb that doesn't take a direct object is intransitive. A verb that does take a direct object is transitive. In this case, it's intransitive. We don't have a direct object in this sentence. So we have angelos kuriou ephane auto. An angel of the Lord appeared to him. Okay? Now, let me show you this case endings chart. We looked at part of this last time. I'm going to show you the full case endings chart this time. And here it is. Don't get scared. Remember, this is the one that I don't think maybe is particularly helpful, but if it makes sense to you, great. This is a chart of just the endings, okay? No vowels connected to it. This is just the endings that get added on to the stem of the word. And notice we have nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. That's the order that they're listed. I know we learned nominative and accusative first because those are the most simple. Those are actually the first and last, first and fourth on the list. Genitive, dative are in the middle there. And then we have nominative, genitive, dative, accusative in the plural down below. And notice, once again, we have the 2 for second declension, or the pattern 2, masculine, and then feminine, and then neuter kind of going across there. Feminine is first declension, neuter is second declension as well. Let me show you a little bit different option. This is the case ending chart with the last vowel attached. This is more helpful in my mind because it shows how they're actually going to look, at least much closer to how they're going to look. And just to point something out, notice that the feminine singular, we have 2 different options. We have a or ah. We have ace or as, okay? That's because some feminine nouns end in an eta and some end in an alpha. So when we're looking at just the ending, that's not going to matter. But if we're looking at the last vowel in the ending, it's going to be different, okay? So again, that doesn't matter too much. Just know that there's a bit of a range for those feminine singular nouns. Now, this is the chart that I think is most helpful, is to have the endings connected to actual words, okay? So here we have our 3 words for our paradigm. Logos is our masculine, graphe is our feminine, and ergon is our neuter. And notice that nominative singular form is what we're going to call the lexical form. Lexical form is meaning the default, the vanilla, the basic. If you're going to look up a noun in a lexicon, which is just a Greek dictionary, you're going to look up the nominative singular form. So you're going to look up logos and graphe and ergon. If you're using the vocabulary cards from the Mounts package, or if you're using the Mounts book to learn your vocabulary, or if you're even getting vocabulary from us, they're always going to show up in that lexical form, which is nominative singular, and then they get modified after that. So you can look down the list there for masculine: lagos, lagu, lago, lagon, and then nominative plural: lagoi, lagon, lagois, and lagus. Now, this is one of those things, you just got to spend some time with it. Just, make some flashcards for these 24 different options, or since you have the repeat on the neuters there, the 22 different options, and just spend some time, spend some frequency. Look at these, work until you get them down, come back a little bit later, spend 15 minutes on them here and there, just practice. You'll get good at these, and I'll tell you what, in a couple weeks, this will be old news to you. You'll be able to identify these super easily. It won't be hard at all. Just like learning anything else. It's weird when it first starts, but as you move along, it'll get better and better. So let me just read down the feminine column there, starting with nominative singular. We've got graphe, and then graphes, and then graphe. And let me make a comment here. Notice the dative singular all the way across. What do you notice that's unique about the dative singular? Right, there's an iota subscript there, right? So lago, we've got an omega with an iota subscript underneath. The graphe, we've got an eta with the iota subscript underneath, and ergo with an iota subscript underneath. That's good news, isn't it? That's a hint. Anytime you see that iota subscript, you can immediately think dative singular. Notice that's the only one that shows up that's going to have the iota subscript at this point. That's good news. We'll keep going. Graphane. Notice once again, lagon, graphane, ergon. Notice that nu is that sign of the accusative singular. Okay? That's good news as well. We'll keep going. Nominative plural. Graphi. Graphone. Let's pause here again. Notice genitive plural all the way across. Lagon, graphone, and ergone, very common endings, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. That own ending is just really common. Now you might say, well, but Nick, if I see an own ending, how am I going to know which gender it is? Well, because remember, we're learning gender with the words. We're not letting the endings tell us gender. Gender is fixed in the word. And so we want to make sure when we're learning our vocabulary that we're learning our gender with it. Now, the endings will give you hints, and there's other things that will give you hints as well, but we want to remember that gender is fixed with the word. It's not dependent on the ending. The ending is going to morph to the gender of the word. And then finally, after graphone, we've got graphis and graphos. And then let's look at ergon there. Ergon, ergu, ergo, and ergon. Remember, we've got that repetition there for nominative and accusative singular in the neuter. And then erga, ergon, ergois, and erga. Once again, the nominative and accusative plural are going to be the same. Notice the similarities. Let your brain kind of notice those. For example, dative plural for the masculine and neuter are pretty much the same. Logois and ergois, that omicron iota sigma ending. It's pretty similar for the feminine too. It's ice instead of ois, but still very similar. Notice that they all have iotas as part of that ending. So all the datives have iotas as part of their endings, either as a subscript or as part of the ending. Can that be a hint for you? I hope so. Okay, so that is our case endings chart. You'll want to spend some time with that because what's going to happen, you're not going to have to write this out from memory or anything like that. But when we encounter these words and sentences, we want to know what they're telling us. The word is going to scream to you. It's going to tell you what it is, what it's supposed to be doing. And we just have to know those signals. Okay, so let's spend a little time talking about the definite article. Okay, the definite article in English is the word the. And it's the difference between saying a ball and the ball, or a man and the man, or whatever, right? It makes something definite. It's not indefinite, as it could be anything. It's definite in the sense that we're talking about something specific. The ball versus a ball, okay? Now, how many forms of the word the are there in English? Just one. There's only one form, and it's just T-H-E. It's just the, okay? When I was a little kid, I used to think the was a different word, like the end at the end of books. You'd hear the end. They're just pronouncing the in a funny way, right? There's still only one form of it. Greek is going to have a different form of the definite article for each of these cases and genders and numbers, okay? So I just showed you that chart of all of the case endings connected to words. We have a similar chart to look at that's the definite article. Now, don't freak out. There's lots of overlap here. So let me show you this chart. Notice that for nominative singular, for the masculine and the feminine, we've got rough breathing marks there, right? Masculine and feminine, nominative singular, we've got ha and hey as the two. And then nominative plural, we have the same thing for the masculine and feminine. We've got hoy and hi, but everything else on that chart, other than those four, everything else starts with which letter? Right, a tau, okay? And Mounts is actually going to say in his textbook, he's going to say to think of those as interchangeable. Taus and rough breathing marks, think of those as interchangeable, because you're going to see some of that. If that's not helpful, don't worry about it right now. But this chart, you're going to notice, is actually very similar to the ending chart. Let me put them up next to each other, okay? I know this is a lot of information on one single slide. So ha, hey, ta across the top, that's maybe not particularly helpful because you don't see a ton of overlap there. But look at genitive. Look at that second line there. It's to, taste, to, reading across the genitive singular definite article there. And notice those endings. I've got the endings there for you, not connected to words right now, but just the endings with the last connecting vowel. Notice the genitive singular crossed. It's oo, and then it's os or ace, depending on what that last vowel is, and oo again. So essentially, it's exactly the same as the endings on a genitive singular word. The definite article is going to look pretty much exactly the same. Now, taste, that genitive singular feminine definite article, it's always going to be taste there for the genitive. It's not going to be tas, okay? A genitive word can end in os, but the definite article is still going to be the taste there. Now look at the dative singular going across, toe, te, toe. What do you notice there? Right, once again, iota subscript. That's helpful. That'll tip you off that that is a dative singular. And again, notice masculine dative singular and neuter dative singular are the same. They take the same definite article. Okay, that's less to learn. Again, that's never going to be confusing in context. Notice the accusative singular, ton, tain, ta. Okay, once again, notice for that neuter, nominative, and accusative singular, it's ta in both places, just like the ending is the same. It's on, like remember ergon for both nominative neuter singular and accusative neuter singular. Okay, we've got ta in each case. Now, going down to the plural side, we have hoi, hi, ta. Okay, which, by the way, when we look at the nominative plural endings, we've got oi, I, and ah, essentially exactly the same. Genitive plural, look at that all the way across. Tone, tone, tone. The endings are own. That's wonderfully regular, isn't it? It's so consistent. It's really hard to forget genitive plural because it's just tone all the time. Okay, and then dative plural, we've got tois, tais, tois, exactly like our endings there, ois, ice, ois. And then accusative plural, we've got tus, tas, and ta. Our accusative plural is us, os, and ah. All right, one wrinkle to show you here. Notice that since in our endings, genitive singular can end in alpha, sigma. Okay, so that means our feminine genitive singular form of, for example, hora, which means hour, is going to be horas. What would the feminine accusative plural form of hora be? Right, also horas. Okay, so that's a word. Any of those feminine nouns that end in alpha, they're going to have that alpha ending. Their genitive singular and their accusative plural are going to be in that same form. Now, is that confusing in actual context? Again, no. Why is it not going to be confusing? Well, for one, context is always going to help us. Number two, if the definite articles show up, they have different definite articles. It's either going to be taste or it's going to be tas. And then just function of the sentence, it's going to be pretty obvious. The difference between genitive singular and accusative plural is just pretty major once you get to actually applying that to sentences. So that's not going to be confusing once you get into the translation mode, but right now it is. We just have to memorize that little weirdness difficulty. So let's review what we learned today. We learned Greek nouns. We know all four cases at this point. We know nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. Those are the foundations, the building blocks of the whole Greek noun system. That's how Greek people think, is in cases. We learned the genitive and dative we mentioned there. Genitive is the possessive case, and dative is the case of the indirect object. And we reviewed what the indirect object was. And then finally, we learned the definite article. And the definite article is your friend. The definite article will really help you when you start translating. You might see a word show up that you don't know at all. You have no idea what this noun is. But guess what? If it is a definite article attached to the front of it, you can tell me case, gender, number, can't you? Or at least case and number. Why? Because you know your definite article. And the definite article is going to tell you what that word is doing. So the definite article is your friend. Memorize that, rehearse that, get it in your brain as soon as possible, because man, is it going to help when you're doing your homework, when you're doing your practice sentences. The definite article is your friend. Well, friends, I'm going to leave you there. Spend time going over this. Give yourself breaks. Give yourself some grace. This is a big step, but I want to encourage you to keep climbing that Greek staircase. Even though this is a big step, you can do it. Keep going. God bless, and we'll see you next time.